Thank you so much for being on board the transatlantic. I've chased you, and finally I can have you here on board and cross the ocean.
My pleasure, Simone.
Hey, look, we all believe that each of us is an ocean of erratic thoughts and wild feelings. I know for certain, even though this is the very first time that I meet you in person or virtually, that your ocean must be beautiful. So I would say, let's get to it. Let's go through the 7 questions, like the 7 C's, and hopefully we can uncover a side of you that many don't know. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
Okay, good. First question. 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea is an adventure novel by Jules Verne. It is regarded to be one of the very first adventure novels. Now, the title refers to the distance traveled under the various seas, 20,000 leagues, which is roughly 80,000 kilometers. It's nearly twice the circumference of Earth. It's the ultimate journey that you can make. Now, bridging this into advertising and talking about ultimate journeys, you are the master of the ultimate journey. You went from receptionist straight up to the top and CEO of one of the most regarded agencies in the country, Holliday. It's a trip that sounds like an adventure novel. Now, when you embark in an adventure trip, you fight monsters. What monster did you find along the way?
I would say, Simone, the biggest monster I found along the way was perception, and I really had to fight that all along my journey. And so, I will say that although personally I always felt prepared for the next job, and I always say that I've had the same 17 jobs everybody my age has had. I've just been lucky enough to have them all at Holliday. But I always had to kind of shake the perception of the previous job. And so I was in a position oftentimes where like on a Monday I reported to someone, and then on a Tuesday they reported to me. Wow. And they were usually men, and they were usually older than me, and that can be kind of tricky. So the biggest challenge for me was not necessarily being able to reinvent myself. That was kind of the easy part, but being able to reinvent myself perceptually in other people's eyes in the same agency I grew up in. And so, you know, I think it's probably easier to reinvent yourself when you take on a new role by going to a new place where you're kind of given the benefit of the doubt automatically, and people are like, oh, you know, here comes the new account person from Holliday or whatever. You know, they're very accepting versus having to constantly reinvent yourself to others who just might see you a certain way and kind of get stuck in the past perceptually, if that makes sense.
Oh my God, you touch upon a topic that is so valuable. I mean, often I'm asked, like, you know, what's the best way to climb up like the ladder of your career? And like clearly the easiest way would be just like to hop from one place to another and step by step trying to climb the ladder of the career, because perception, that monster you were talking about, is what makes the difference. When you walk in a place as a receptionist, you will always be the receptionist, and to change that perception, it takes bravery, guts, and a resilience that not so many people have. So, which is the reason why I wanted to cross your ocean today, because I know that in that ultimate journey, there must be some kind of like diamond in the rough, like your resilience, your bravery must be off the chart. And the answer just proved this. So thank you so much. Okay, second question. Staring at the ocean results in a meditative state. Scientifically, it can change the frequency of brain waves to match the one with the seas. Now imagine you are staring out at the ocean, reflecting on your career. Undeniably has been like a wonderful run. You've been named one of the 100 most influential women in advertising. What a title. Now, you are one of the few chairwoman, allow me to say so, chairwoman of an agency in the country. What's the little girl inside you is saying right now?
Well, I would say that that little girl inside me is saying that she's surprised at how far confidence and optimism has taken her. Because Simone, I always say that confidence and optimism were really all I had when I started out. And can I tell you a little story that's always
Absolutely.
So it's actually a story that Walt Disney, who I've always admired and I've studied, but Walt Disney used to tell this story, and it's from way back in the day when the circus would roll into all these small American towns by train. And to get from the train station to where the circus performed was quite a long distance. And so that created a little marketing opportunity, which was a parade. So the ringmaster was responsible for organizing the parade, and the parade always included a marching band. And one day he was short a couple musicians, and so we asked the people in the town who were just, the bystanders, if anyone would volunteer to play in the band in the parade. And if you volunteered to play in the band, you'd get a free pass to the circus. So in particular that day, he was looking for a trombone player. And this little kid kind of like raised his hand and said, "I'll do it." So he gives the kid the trombone, and the kid takes his place in the parade, and off they go. And soon it becomes clear that the kid had no idea how to play the trombone. He was just terrible. And when the parade ended, the ringmaster was, he was upset, and he said to the kid, like, "Why didn't you tell me you couldn't play the trombone?" And the kid just like shrugged his shoulders and said, "I didn't know I couldn't play the trombone because I'd never tried before." So Simone, there were so many times in my career that I can remember thinking that just because I hadn't done something before, it didn't mean I couldn't do it. And I just kind of had to rely on confidence and optimism to get me through. So
what a beautiful story. I think it's funny because, like, as you were telling the story, I was literally visualizing in my head these little kids at the trombone, and you remind me like one of those like animated story, like cartoonists that you see like in a video. You should have some of your creative actually illustrate the story. It makes a wonderful lesson of resilience, like, and bravery. That's awesome. And optimism. That is great. Okay, look, by 2050, many scientists hope that we can all look back and say that the change we began to make in our lifestyle have guaranteed a better outcome for our oceans. Talking about the advertising business, what change do we need to make today to get to 2050 in a pretty good shape and sure that we have done all we possibly could?
So I would say the most urgent change that we need to make in our business is to get more diverse and more inclusive and more equitable. And if we don't hurry up, I think we're going to find ourselves facing a true existential crisis. So, people tend to go where they're celebrated, not where they're tolerated. So I think as an industry, we better start celebrating, or we're not going to be around much longer. And I have to say that last year, due to a lot of good people's efforts in this area, there's been great pressure on agencies to be more diverse. But diversity is one thing that's about the numbers, and accountability for the increasing your diversity and the numbers is great, and it's really important, but it's just the beginning. So there's also the importance of inclusion, which is about opportunities to advance and providing the emotional safety that people from underrepresented communities need to be able to advance. And then most important is equity. which, and equity is tricky because equity really, it means it's a true shift in power. And, power shifts, that's tricky. And in order for people to gain power, other people have to be willing to give up power, which in my experience is not usually the case. And I experienced this to some degree in my career as a woman. So this is where I put the focus at Hill Holliday. In fact, I don't call it DE&I like most people at Hill Holiday. We call it ED&I. So putting the E first, because to me, equity for underrepresented groups, particularly for BIPOC and Black people, is equity is the most important thing. So I think that's a real existential threat to our industry.
Like 2050 might seems to be a date that is so far away from us, but realistically, nothing is so far away from us. Like, this year I read a book, it was a science fiction book by Philip Dick, and called like, Do Android Dream of Electric Ships?
Mm-hmm.
Such a crazy title, right? It takes place in 2021. And it was written a long time ago. And I always thought like, well, 2021, who knows where we're gonna be, right? And so, but the same principle, 2050 won't be that far away. And you're right, if we don't make the changes, we might not exist anymore as a business. And another thing that's, it's really resonated with me is like, we often forget that diversity and inclusion, they don't just come in numbers. Behind those numbers, they are like pumping hearts and vivid minds, and like, and so it's all connected. And personally, I do think that diversity and inclusion is a mindset first. You need to adopt that kind of mindset. You need to think diversity, you need to think inclusion, and then the number will follow. But if we just gonna look at the number, it's always gonna end up in a spreadsheet, and humans don't lay very well on a spreadsheet. So anyway.
And if we don't prepare our agencies and our industry, it's, it can be just, one step forward, two steps back.
Absolutely, absolutely. For question, the first transatlantic steamship was called Savannah, and it was built in 1819. History has it that President James Monroe was so impressed with that vessel that he began obsessing over it, and obsessing so much that he wanted to buy it. Mm. The creative industry is a landfill with ideas, inventions, and shining toys. Is there anything that truly impressed you over the last year, and that secretly you say to yourself, I want to have that thing, man. I really want to have it.
Well, I gotta say, and even after watching all the work in the Super Bowl, the Match.com work with Satan matching with 2020, I kind of obsessed over that. That made me very jealous, and I wish I had done that. And so, which, as you know, in our business is like the supreme compliment. But I think after the year that we had with really every agency and every brand trying to figure out how to respond to the events of 2020, and as an industry, we kind of veered around from, okay, well, let's do sad. No, let's do empathy. We need to be optimistic. No, we need to be funny. The whole industry just kind of doing the same safe work over and over again. Right. And to me, that Match.com work just nailed it. The insight's brilliant. It's very connected to the product. The craft of the work was amazing. The casting and the performances and the music and everything, the writing, the editing, it really put like a punctuation mark on a year when most of us, most agencies and brands just didn't know what to do. And everybody kind of decided the safe thing would be just to hold up a mirror to what was happening, which of course led to all the ads looking alike, and everybody, in these unprecedented times, and we're all in this together, and the same piano music. Anyway, So for me, Match.com, because they really spun it differently and they leaned in, and they did it in a way that made me laugh, but that also felt true to their brand and felt true to the year we've all had. And
Absolutely, yeah.
anyway, it made me jealous that it's not on my agency reel.
It was a great piece of work. And, you know, from a creative point of view, I'm a strong believer that's like, you know, idea find you. And if you are constant and like stubborn enough, like to dig for it down. So I do believe that there is like an array of ideas in front of us, great ideas, and it's all about getting to them. And when we don't get to them, someone else gets to them, it's because probably they have done like a better homework, better digging, better thinking, better planning. But the idea was there, has been there all the time. It's all about going there, grab them. And so I think that's like the pure, honest, healthy jealousy that comes when someone else come up with a great work. For me, is because we were in a race and I didn't have the stamina, or I didn't have the creative power to get to find the idea. But what fascinated me is like the idea was there, has been there all the time. It was just about to go there and cover them.
And we can't be afraid to admire other people's work. I think that that jealousy kind of, you know, it propels us.
Motivational, definitely. Okay, so I read that you graduated in French literature. Am I correct?
Oui.
Okay, so I'm kind of like, you know, a big fan of French literature. I grew up reading like Balzac and like Flaubert, but then I steer like over like, you know, Simone de Beauvoir and like later in life, Louis Ferdinand Céline. But I want to talk about Simone de Beauvoir. Simone de Beauvoir, her husband was like Jean-Paul Sartre, was a very fierce activist and a pioneer, a feminist, and one of my favorite French writers. Now, Simone believed that instead of being encouraged to dream their own dreams, women were told to dream for others. Mm-hmm. Now, our industry, as you say earlier, has a long-standing debt towards women, and it hasn't been fair, and the word equality remain a mirage. What can we do as an industry to make sure that young women that come into this industry, they are encouraged to dream their own dream and not to dream for the others?
Well, first of all, Simone, I really appreciate the question because we have got to figure this out. And I'm sure you've heard this recession is being referred to as a she-cession. Because a disproportionate number of jobs that have been lost by women. And there was just I think it's the McKinsey study, but they found 1 in 4 women said they were thinking of leaving the workforce altogether because of you know, inflexibility in their companies and because of their caregiving responsibilities and just stress. And so and those statistics were even higher for women of color. So we're facing a real crisis where everything we women have worked for the past 30 years could be lost in just 1 year. So as leaders, if we want to encourage women to dream their own dreams, we need to drive institutional change that is gonna level the playing field. And it's more than just offering flexible work arrangements, because you know, for example, with a heterosexual couple, if one person has to cut back, it's very likely to be the person who earns less money. And because of the gender wage gap, that's more likely to be a woman. And so at Holliday, we just conducted a third-party pay equity study to ensure that our people are being paid fairly and equitably, and that there's no systemic bias. Because if there's bias in the system and more women drop out of the workforce than men, there will be fewer women role models. And, you know, we say, you know, to be it, you have to see it. And so representation of women and of other underrepresented groups at the top is so important. So I think it's really important that we figure this out.
Absolutely. And I think that these institutional changes need to come with the word empathy. I've been saying this on Transatlantic a few times, but I do find that our industry lacks enormously in empathy. It's a word that they don't recognize, it's a word that they don't want to hear. There is a perception of an appearance of empathy, but it's not a true empathy from company. And so when you were talking about like flexible work, making life easier, just for the mother, right? Just to be more simple, it's hard to find a company nowadays that is willing to do that. There is little empathy from in our industry, and like, you know, and so I do agree with you, like we are on the cusp of like a big change, and if we don't make this right, we're gonna lose all the little progress we have made in the past few years. I'm totally agree with you on that. I see the shore, and this is the sixth question. The bottom of the ocean is made of layers of Earth's crust. Unlike the soft sands along the shoreline, the job of these deep layers is to hold the water in. This sounds like the perfect metaphor for humankind. We are made of many layers, whose job is to hold our beings. If I were to travel deep down in your ocean, what's the first layer I will bump into? And what is it made of?
The first layer is definitely made of curiosity. I've always, you know, I'm a lifelong learner. I've always tried to retain that natural curiosity that we have as children, and I think curiosity has really served me well over the years. And you know, I always say, Simone, there's two kinds of people. There are people who are more inspired by what they know than what they don't know, and then there are people who are more inspired by what they don't know than by what they do know. And I'm definitely more inspired by what I don't know.
Love
And
it.
yeah, and that you know, I'm super curious about everything, and I think if you're super curious and you have an open mind and you are paying attention to everything happening around you, and not just in our business, but in, you know, film and music and literature and art and style and fashion and popular culture, and you really lean into change and you embrace change. I always say you have to give change a big warm hug. I think if you do that, you're always going to put yourself in a position to learn and to do better and to be better. So curiosity is definitely that first layer for me.
That's awesome. And you know, I do believe that we are the results of all our question marks.
Exactly.
That we are made of the question marks that we ask. The question that we ask is what made us. There is so much, like, you know, power in a question, and the exclamation point, they only come after. They only come after the question marks. So in alphabet, to me, when I look at the question mark, there is so much optimism and like curiosity in the little sign. And I always think like the exclamation point only come to support the question mark and be surprised of what you just know now. Anyway,
that's a really nice way to put it.
Last question, and it's the question that we ask to all our guests. If there was a wind that blow your sail, if you were to name the wind, what would that be?
Okay, this one's easy for me too. It's belief. Belief. And I always say my mother was my I believe in you person. And my mother really instilled the power of belief in me. So all through my childhood and my young adult years and even into my early career, my mother's belief in me was what powered my sails. That was the wind that powered my sails. And then as I rose through the ranks at Holliday, I started to learn the power of self-belief and knowing I could do the next job, I could work harder than the next person, I could, you know, hopefully rise to levels that nobody had ever risen to from where I came from. And so, you know, and now that I'm here, I try to use belief to power other people's sails by giving them opportunities that they you know, they may think at the time are beyond their capability, and then you show them that you believe in them, and that gives them permission to believe in themselves. So it's really quite lovely. And I was very much the beneficiary of that philosophy, and I try hard to pay that forward today. And by the way, Simone, I don't know if you've seen Ted Lasso on Apple TV, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it, but belief is, you know, one of the reasons it really resonated with me, and it's just brilliant. And so, you know, I highly recommend it.
But you know, it's funny that you say belief. It's such a strong word, but and I told you, like, you know, I didn't know you personally. I know your career, but the very first thing that came to my mind when I look at your career and the fact that you stay in an agency for so long, I think it's really belief. And now the way you split it, like between belief and self-belief, is so beautiful. But it's truly something that this wind is all around you. You actually truly, like, you know, it encapsulates you. So it's such a wonderful answer. Anyway, look, your ocean is beautiful. Whatever, like every time I cross someone ocean, I try always to look back and see what I've met. And like, with you, there is so many words that resonate: optimism, like, you know, resilience and bravery and belief. And so I thank you so much for being board the transatlantic and for letting me cross your ocean and taking the time to talk to me. Okay.
Oh, my pleasure. I learned a lot, Simone. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.